Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Koro More Tama Vina Ke Dayalu Jagata Sangsare Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Koro More Bina Ke Dayalu Jagata Sangsare Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Koro More Tama Bina Ke Dayalu Jagata Sangsare Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Koro More Patita Pavana Hetu Tavaya Avatara Moshama Patita Prabhu Napaibeara Patita Pavana Hetu Tavaya Avatara Atta Prabhu Ha ha Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhi Kripa Balokana Koro Ami Boroduki Ha ha Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhi Kripa Balakana Koro Ami Boroduki Ha ha Prabhu Nityananda Premananda Sukhi Kripa Balokana Koro Ami Boroduki Ha Prabhu Nityananda Daya Karo Sitapati Advaita Gosai Tava Kripa Bale Pai Chaitanya Nitai Sitapati Advaita Gosai kripa valepa Chaitanya Nita Ha Swarup Sanatana Rupa Raghunatha Bhatta Yuga Shri Chivaha Prabhu Lokanatha Ha Swarup Sanatana Rupa Raghunatha Bhatta Yuga Shri Jiva Prabhu Lokanatha Daya Karo Shri Acharya Prabhu Srinivas Ramachandra Sangamage Narottama Das Namaduru Sri Acharya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Karo More Toma Bina Ke Dayalu Jagata Samsare Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Daya Karo More Namavina Kedayalu Jagata Samsare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Gauranita Gauranita Jai Jaya Gaura Nitai. Shishi Jagannapadadev Subhadra Devi ki Jai. Shishi Gonitai ki Jai. Grantaraj Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shishi Guru, and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna devotees, we're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 24, the 61 explanations of the Atmarama verse, text 285. Atma Shabde Kahe Sarva Vidha Bhagavan. Atma Shabde Kahe Sarva Vidha Bhagavan. Eka Swayam Bhagavan Ara Bhagavan Akyan. Eka Swayam Bhagavan Ar Bhagavan Akyan. Atma Shabde Kahe Sarva Vidha Bhagavan. Eka Swayam Bhagavan Ar Bhagavan Akyan. Vaishnavas, Prabhus. Mataji's. Miss Bengal, you have the best of all our pronunciations. You should do. Thank you very much. So, word by word translation. Atma Shabde, by the word Atma. Kahe, it is said. Sarva Vidha Bhagavan, all types of personalities of Godhead. Eka, one. Swayam Bhagavan, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna. Ara, another. Bhagavan Akhyana, the personality of Godhead by an expansive designation. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The word atma refers to all the different personalities of Godhead. One of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself, Krishna, and the others are different incarnations or expansions of Krishna. Purport. The word atma also includes all kinds of personalities known as Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This means that Krishna has unlimited expansions. This is described in the Brahma Samhita 546. Diparchir eva hidashanta rama bhupetya dipayate vivrita hetu samana dharma yastadrik eva hicha vishnu taya vibhati govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. The expansions of Krishna are thus compared to candles that have been lit from an original candle. All the secondary candles are equally powerful, but the original candle is that from which all the others have been lit. Krishna is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he is expanded as Balaram, Sankarshan, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Vasudev. In this way, there are innumerable incarnations and expansions who are also called Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Regarding the variety of personalities known as Bhagavan, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the personality of Godhead known as Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that his expansions are also called the Personality of Godhead. In other words, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the origin of all other personalities of Godhead. Speculative philosophers and mystic yogis also meditate upon the form of Krishna, but this form is not the form of the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a Bhagavan is but a partial representation of the Lord's full potency. Nonetheless, he also has to be understood to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To clarify this matter, one should simply understand that Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj in Vrindavan, the friend of the cowherd boys and the lover of the gopis, is actually the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is attained by spontaneous love. Although his expansions are also called the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are attained only by the execution of regulative devotional service. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnu padaya Krishna preshtaya bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Shivaram Swaminiti Namine. Once again, the verse Atma Shabde Kahe Sarva Vidha Bhagavan Eka Swayam Bhagavanar Bhagavana Kyan. The word Atma refers to all the different personalities of Godhead. One of them is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Himself, Krishna, and the others are different incarnations or expansions of Krishna. So we're still in this chapter 24 of Madhya Lila, where Srila Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing to Sanatana Goswami different imports of the Atma Rama verse. We've been in this chapter for a long time already, and we continue. And now the word Atma is being put into different understandings. And it is said here, Atma refers to all different personalities of Godhead. So, those of you who were here last week, we were discussing a little bit how can we understand what is the actual meaning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. What was the conclusion? Do you remember? How do we understand Srimad Bhagavatam? Through Guru. Yes. Through Guru, Sadhu, we can understand Shastra. Through the Mahabhagavats, because they themselves have understood the purport, and because them having realized, they can also share it with others. You cannot give what you don't have. That is how it's described. If you're a millionaire, then you can give thousands of francs to somebody. But if you're a pauper, you cannot do that. So similarly, if you have Krishna in your heart, if you have realized Krishna in your heart, then you can actually give him to others. If you have understood the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is none different from Krishna himself, Bhagavatam being the literary incarnation of Krishna, then you can give the import of Bhagavatam to somebody else. And we also discussed this verse a little bit. I just mentioned this beautiful verse that Srila Prabhupada said is the most important verse ever, so to speak. On different occasions he said different things, but also this one was mentioned, and it's a very beautiful verse. Yasya deve para bhaktir, yata deve tata guru, tasyaite katita hiyartaham, prakashante mahatmanaha. That for one who has implicit faith, both in the spiritual master, in Guru, as well as in Krishna, Deva, in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to him all the imports of the Vedic scriptures are revealed in the heart. So that's the actual process. It's not that we can understand Bhagavatam, or for that matter, Krishna himself, by our own efforts. Right? We have to understand this very clearly. It's not that if we study Bhagavatam, and put our minds into it, then we will eventually understand. And still at the same time, of course, we do put in the effort, because we understand that by showing our interest, our eagerness to understand Krishna, then Krishna in turn is inclined to also show himself to us. But we made this point that just from this one verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he draws out 61 meanings. So now there's 18,000 verses in the Bhagavatam, so multiply 18,000 times 61, that's how many meanings we will get. probably even more. There's unending meanings, really. But just making this point that scripture is not so easy to understand, and also that Sanskrit in itself is a very contextual language, so there's a lot of scope for interpretation, and therefore it's very easy to be bewildered and to go astray, and therefore it is very much behooving us to get plugged in to the spiritual powerhouse, which is the spiritual master and the sadhu, that can then reveal to us the current that is coming through the cyclic succession, and by us plugging into that, we will get the Shakti to understand Shastra. And so this is also what Prabhupada here mentions at one point in the purport. Again, where he's saying that speculative philosophers and mystic yogis also meditate upon the form of Krishna, but this form is not the form of the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. So if you're lacking understanding, if you're lacking the understanding also how to understand the Bhagavatam and the scripture and Krishna, then you will have to resort to concoctions. You will have to make up your own image of who is God and what's the process to attain him and so on. And that's what we see very much in this world. And that's why Srila Prabhupada, he made a big point to establish this understanding, even in the name of ISKCON, right? In the early days, there's a story where one person, I don't remember who it was, he came to Srila Prabhupada and told him, so you want to establish this ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, but wouldn't it be way better, more inclusive, if you just put God Consciousness, International Society of God Consciousness? And, does make sense, right? Why not? And if we want to appeal to a Western audience, then Krishna might be very foreign, so why have a hurdle like that? Which Westerner wants to be part of an institution of Krishna consciousness? But if it's about God consciousness, that sounds way more open, inclusive. But Prabhupada, he didn't budge an inch. He would never even think about that. He would just right away discard this idea, and he said, no, this is the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Because we have to understand, that's what makes it so different from all the other traditions, that in our understanding it is very, very clear who is God, who are we, and how can we reconnect. And that's always a fun thing to do on the streets with Krishnites. The Christians, of course, they have their own understanding who is God, and so if you approach them with a book about spirituality, then they're very suspicious because they're afraid that it is not their God. And I then usually point out, no, this is the same God. In this kind of understanding that Mahaprabhu presents, atma can refer to Krishna, can also refer to another incarnation of God, an expansion. So in that sense, we always say God is one, right? And it's true, but also at the same time he's many. So yeah, our God is the same God like the God in Christianity, like the God in Islam. But at the same time, we have a more defined and specific picture of who is actually the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. The example is given in Brahma Samhita that there's many candles, but there's a first candle which then lights the others. It's a very graphic image, very beautiful, very easy to understand. So Krishna is the first candle, and only through him can the other candles become also lit. And so difficult to understand if your philosophy, if your theology is not open to that, if your theology ends with just God being like more of a concept but not actually a personality. Some would go as far as to say even other religions, other conceptions of the absolute truth, they're also impersonal. Even Christianity, even Islam, the so-called Abrahamic traditions, they don't have a clear picture of God being a person or who that person is, and therefore eventually it would almost have to be considered a impersonal form of religion. But that's a bigger discussion where we won't go into. But Srila Prabhupada, he always made it very clear that to understand Krishna, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, we have to go through our parampara. We cannot jump over. We cannot, first of all, understand Krishna by ourselves, as we said before. But we have to also consider and learn from the teachers that passed on this knowledge to us. And in this way, Srila Prabhupada, of course, is a first reference point. Through our spiritual master, we come to Srila Prabhupada, who then directs us further into parampara, and originally going back to the Goswamis. Narottam Das Thakur, he also sings, Narottam Das Thakur, he says, Rupa Raghunatha Pade hoibe akuti kabe hama bujabo se jugala piriti. That's one verse our spiritual master always quotes time and again, in the same vein that here Narottam Das Thakur is saying, when shall I be very much eager to study the books left by the 6 Goswamis, headed by Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Raghunath Das Goswami? By their instruction, I shall be able to properly understand the loving affairs of Radha and Krishna. Similarly, also Srila Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami, at the end of every chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, Shri Rupa Raghunatha Pade Yare Ash Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Kahe Krishna Das. I'm writing this Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita following in the footsteps of Rupa Raghunath. I'm not, trying to do my own thing here, present something I have realized by my own strength, but just by following the teachings that I have received from the Goswamis, headed by Rupa and Raghunath, I write this literature. And so it is really the Goswamis, the 6 Goswamis, that point us towards who is Krishna. Because once Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj, he makes this point, how the Goswamis revealed to us the Supreme Personality of Krishna. So even among Krishna, as we hear in this purport, there's many different forms, but then there's a Supreme Personality of Krishna. There's different Krishnas even, and there's a Supreme one amongst them. Of course, we understand in the spiritual sense that Supreme doesn't mean something else is less, right? Right now, Kartik month is coming up. Damodar Leela is being glorified, and the eternal bond that Mother Yashoda shares with Krishna in his baby form. And we don't say that this Krishna form, Damodar, is less than Krishna as the Navayovanam, in his youthful form as a 15, 16-year-old boy, enjoying pastimes with the Gopas and Gopis. But still, we do understand that from a rasic point of view, there is a differentiation also. There's a beautiful verse. I forget it right now. Somebody of you knows this one where I think it's from CC, where it is pointed out that Krishna he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his original form is the one as a beautiful youth, a cowherd boy of Vrindavan in this Kaishore age. And then the most elevated of places is Vrindavan, and of all rasas, the Adi Ras, the Ras of conjugal love, is the most splendid. So in this way, even in spirituality, everything being perfect, there is perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. And Keshav Maharaj goes on to explain that the Goswamis, especially Rupa Goswami, he starts his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with this verse, Akhila Rasamrita Murti Prasmirara Ruchi Ruta Taraka Pali Kalita Shyam Lalita Radha Preyan Vidur Jayati. Let the Supreme Personality of Godhead be glorified by virtue of his expanding attractive features. He subjugated the gopis named Taraka and Pali and absorbed the minds of Shyama and Lalita. He is the most attractive lover of Srimati Radharani and is the reservoir of pleasure for devotees in all transcendental mellows. So here Rupa Goswami is pointing out how Krishna is the Rasa Kila Murti. That's why he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original Supreme Personality of God. That's the distinguishing feature of Krishna, is that all the rasas can be enjoyed in his personality. Other expansions of him, they sometimes are specifically, there for experiencing one rasa. Like we have, of course, Vishnu forms, Narayan forms, which are reciprocating with their devotees in a mood of awe and reverence. Or then there's Vatsalya and so on. So these different rasas are there, but only in Krishna himself, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of all the other forms, all the rasas can be enjoyed simultaneously. But then Rupa Goswami also describes who can actually relish this rasa. So we have to get qualified to relish that rasa. And Keshav Maharaj, being good with words, he's speaking about how the definition of rasa, if you put it into English words, is that the taster tastes the taste because of good taste. It's funny, no? The taster tastes the taste because of good taste. So there's taste, but the one who tastes it, he can only taste if he has a good taste. Yeah? Because if we're polluted still and our taste is not so good, we will not be able to really relish the mellow. And he gives the analogy with the wine connoisseur, which is not very like rules and regulation example, but anyway, it's a good one because they're very much into this, right? These wine tasters, they taste wine and they really relish it. Like my father also, he's really into wine. Shishi Jagannapadev Subhadra Devi ki jai. Shishi Gornitai ki jai. There's a whole culture around wine, right? And my father was pointing out when he was here, as always, somehow it always comes to wine, because I was introducing Adhikesha Guru and said he lived in Chile, and he said, oh, Chile, good wine. First thing that comes to mind. It's interesting how we all have different relationships. They say there's a certain déformation professionnelle, yeah? Professional deformation, in the kind of field that you work, that's how you will see the world. And it's actually a deformation. A deformation is like almost a little bit of how you say? What's that? How would you translate deformation? A bias, yeah. But almost like a negative bias that you will see everything through these lenses and will blend out so many other things which could be very enriching. Especially, for example, for my father, so many other nice things in Chile, but he will just see the wine. So anyway, so there's a whole culture around wine. And these people, they really train their taste buds so that they can taste all the different flavors, right? It's always even amusing to listen to them if you ever heard them. The wine. This wine is very fruity, has an aroma of vanilla and a scent of earth, flavored with jasmine, something like this. Just have very wonderful, beautiful words to describe something like wine. So, in a similar way, the devotees who really have developed these taste buds of how to relish the transcendental exchanges with the Lord, they then can really take the most benefit from having a relationship with Krishna. And when speaking of the different incarnations of Krishna and how we understand Krishna through the previous acharyas, is also very important to understand that Krishna is none different from Shri Gauranga, right? We know this. It is also stated in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the verse number 3. So right in the beginning, Kaviraj Goswami makes this very clear. Yat tadvaitam brahmanopanishadi tadapyasya tanuba ya atmantaryami purusho iti so shyanksha vibhava shadaishvaya purno yaiha bhagavan sasvayamayam na chaitanyat krishnach jagati parat tattvam paramiha. What the Upanishads describe as the impersonal Brahman is but the effulgence of his body, and the Lord known as the Supersoul is but his localized plenary portion. Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of God, of Godhead, Krishna himself, full with 6 opulences. He is the Absolute Truth, and no other truth is greater than or equal to him. So it's not that actually Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is like an avatar, like we have other avatars like Ramachandra or Matsya avatar or these avatars. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. He's coming here with the full opulences of Krishna, all the 6 opulences. And in this way, he can do what only Krishna can do. This is also described in the 3rd chapter of Adilila. Yuga Dharma Pravartana Haya Angsha Haite Amavina Anyanare Vracha Premadite. My plenary portions can establish the principles of religion for each age. No one but me, however, can bestow the kind of loving service performed by the residents of Raj. This is what Krishna says, Kaviraj quoting Krishna. But we can understand, so only Krishna can establish the loving relationship of conjugal love in this world. And that's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, right? He's also said in another verse, I don't want to quote all the verses, but then he came to spread the knowledge and the understanding of what is the Ujjvala Rasa, Shringa Rasa, the conjugal relationship between Krishna and the gopis, and in this way establish that this rasa is the highest and that is actually attainable for all of us, and that especially for us practicing devotees in this line of Srila Rupa Goswami, the Rupanuga devotees, that we aim towards this goal. And that's also what Prabhupada is pointing out here in the purport of the verse, right? He's saying that one should simply understand that Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj in Vrindavan, the friend of the cowherd boys and lover of the gopis, is actually the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is attained by spontaneous love. Although his expansions are also called the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are attained only by the execution of regulative devotional service. So Prabhupada is clearly pointing out here that there is a difference between how to attain all the other incarnations and expansions of Krishna and attaining Krishna himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the difference is that Krishna, he's only attained by spontaneous love. Is not, and this we discussed also last week a little bit, is not that you can achieve Krishna through any pious activities, through any devotion that is mixed with gyan, with knowledge, or karma, fruitive activities. And of course, there's many beautiful examples of this, and it is again personified in the gopis. This is one pastime that I was thinking of where Krishna was performing the rasa dance with the gopis at Govardhan Hill. But he could notice that the gopis, they were becoming a little bit proud, and it almost seemed like they didn't really understand anymore who is the supreme amongst the gopis, which is Srimati Radharani. So Krishna had the thought, okay, I will trick them so that they will understand who amongst them is the real Rani here, the queen of all the queens. So he hid himself. He ran away from the Rasa Lila. And the gopis, they were fully in rapture, in exchanging loving dealings with Krishna. So for a few moments they didn't realize that Krishna was gone even. But when they realized, they became very upset. And they couldn't just stop their ecstasy, so they immediately went to look for Krishna. In the meantime, though, Srimati Radharani, she collapsed. She couldn't even tolerate Krishna being gone. So the gopis said, okay, we leave you here. The Sakis will take care of you. And we go and look for Krishna. And so they go out, and in Paita, close by Sonk, where they had their Rasa Lila, there in a cave, they see some bluish shimmer, some bluish glimmer coming. And so they go inside the cave, and they see Krishna for a moment, but then it's not Krishna anymore, it's Narayan in a four-handed form. And the gopis are bewildered. They were sure that this was Krishna, but now it's not Krishna. So, okay, they bow down before Narayan and offer their respectful obeisances. But unlike others, some of us maybe, or a person from the street, if they would see a four-handed personality, especially an Indian person, they would then say, wow, this is God himself, Vishnu himself. And they would be so much in awe. But the gopis, they were not really interested. in staying there and exchanging much with him. So they simply asked Narayan, "Dear sir, did you see our Krishna? Where has Krishna gone?" And Krishna was also surprised. Okay, they don't care about Narayan. That's nice. And he just told them, "Yeah, he went that way. Go that way. Just somewhere else." And that's what they did. So Krishna just sent them away, wanting to break their pride. And in the meantime, Srimati Radharani, being totally delirious, she just also was on the lookout for Krishna. The Sakis wanted to calm her down, take her, let her stay there so that she can cool down, but no, she was totally determined to find Krishna. So she also came across this cave and could see the blue glimmer coming from it. And so she entered that cave and she saw Lord Narayan. But when she saw Lord Narayan, she thought something is off here. That's not Lord Narayan. I know how it feels if Krishna is here, and this feels as if Krishna is here. And so in that moment, Krishna being overwhelmed, understanding how Radharani, she can immediately detect him, he melts down in love and he comes back into his two-handed form. And exactly at that point, the other gopis come back on their search and again come to that cave, and they see the glimmer even stronger than before. They go inside and they find Radha and Krishna there. And then they can understand, wow, so this is Radharani's love. She will always, understand who is Krishna, even if he's in disguise. And she will then also make Krishna go back into his original mood. Krishna can never hide his love from Radharani. So this is one example of how the gopis' love is very special. And amongst the gopis' love, the love of Radharani is, of course, the most special. And so we also try to follow in the footsteps of these exalted devotees. We understand that we will never be a gopi, will never be Srimati Radharani, but we can become their servants. And so we have to make sure that our sadhana is according to what we're aiming for. That's the definition of sadhana bhakti. Levi? Prakatyam riti sadhyata. Yeah, very good. So, important verse from Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. When transcendental devotional service by which love for Krishna is attained is executed by the senses, it is called sadhana bhakti, or the regulative discharge of devotional service. Such devotion eternally exists within the heart of every living entity. The awakening of this eternal devotion is the potentiality of devotional service in practice. So Rupa Goswami is describing here that few things. First of all, sadhana means to practice devotional service with the senses. So we understand, we're actually not performing devotional service, we're practicing devotional service. Devotional service itself is something very elevated that is only really done on the stage of bhava. And so that's the actual goal of doing what we're doing. All the activities that we're doing in our day, they have this aim of attaining bhava. That's the potentiality that is within practicing what we're doing, right? So bhava meaning deep emotions of budding love for Krishna. So I think it's something that we can be mindful in our day-to-day life. How much is what I'm doing now going to lead me to the goal that I want to go to really attain Krishna prema, to really have this love for Krishna? Is what I'm doing now conducive to that or not? And if not, how can I change it, or how can I make it more conducive? Because siddhasya lakshanam yat syat sadhanam sadakshat, that the practitioner and the means of practice should be in accord with the goal. If you want to become a doctor, Juhi Mataji knows, then you have to go to medical school. If you go to law school, you will never become a doctor. And if you want to bake a cake, a chocolate cake, but you just put vanilla instead of chocolate, it will not be a chocolate cake. So in the same way, if we want to attain the highest form of pure devotional service, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically came to give us, then we have to be, even if we're very much at the beginning stage of our spiritual life, understand how can we get there. And at this point in time, for most of us, especially for me, I have to say, it's still a faraway thing. This bhava state of where you're just totally immersed in always thinking about Krishna and having these very loving emotions all the time, where you can basically not exist without having Krishna next to you and being in that intimate relationship. But we can first of all go through the process of purification that Prabhupada gives us. In following the Goswamis, he gives us this process of purification of how to progress in spiritual life nicely. And that's why we're practicing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. We're practicing to follow the rules and regulations that scriptures that Rupa Goswami gives us, but always with the understanding that eventually we want to come to that stage of spontaneous devotional service. And in the specific line that we're coming, how we can get the most mercy and the most quick advancement is serving Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. Right? That's because that's what he came to give, to spread the holy name to one and all. And if we take part in this actively with our mind, body and senses, always meditating on this, then this will be the quickest way of progression in spiritual life. And I just wanted to give you one example of how Srila Shiva Maharaj gives analogy, or he puts these two side to side. Because some Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they have a strong emphasis on, okay, just focus on Krishna Lila, hear about Krishna all the time, Ashtakarya Lila, what is he doing in the 8 different times of the day. And so that's there. But the process Srila Prabhupada gave us is more focusing on practicing sadhana bhakti. But of course, with this understanding that it also matures into bhava bhakti, and that there is no difference actually between the two if you practice it how Srila Prabhupada gave it to us. So this is from some Sankirtan meditation. Because someone asked how it was that absorption in book distribution is like meditating on Krishna's 8-fold daily pastimes, and how book distribution can lead to serving Radhashyam in Vraj. The essence to this answer is to understand that Lord Chaitanya is none different from Radha Krishna. Thus, service to Lord Chaitanya by Sankirtan is service to Radha Krishna in the Kunjas, and meditating on how to distribute books is like meditating on Ashtakalya. The difference is that Sankirtan Seva is the manifested form of Kunja Seva and is easily available to practicing devotees as well as perfected devotees. So for us, it's not very much available to meditate on the Kunjas and how to serve Krishna, how to fan him, and all these things. It really requires a very mature state of consciousness. But we can do book distribution. When practicing devotees' hearts are purified by preaching, they are fully qualified for meditation on the 8-fold pastimes and for Radha Krishna service in Vraj. The gopis walk through torrential rain at night, braving dangerous snakes, all to meet Krishna. Sankirtan devotees distribute in the cold and in the rain, and brave the insults of non-devotees, all to serve Gauranga. There is no difference. This week there was, it's interesting how Krishna, he always puts you into situations where some people, like individuals, they say the same things to you, and so you realize it's really Krishna that is speaking through. He wants you to learn something or to react some way or another. So this time I was at Auropale, and within 1 hour, I had a very tough hour. All the book distributors can relate. Sometimes it's just not going. The books are not going out. People are not stopping. And even those interactions you have, they're not nice. So that happened for almost an hour. And then one lady, she was watching me. And, just to add a little bit to the pain, she commented, "Oh, nobody's stopping, huh? Yeah, it must be really bad for you. Yeah, you must feel really bad. But, what are you doing anyway? Why are you doing this, And then she walked away and was like, come on, very rude, just out of, she was just looking and obviously she was happy to see me suffer. And I was thinking, okay, whatever. And I went inside a little mall. So I met a person that was, had not seen me before. But inside that mall also people were rejecting me. So just for a few times she saw that. And then I stopped her. I want to stop her. And she said, leave me alone. Why are you doing this? She was saying, are you not fed up with nobody caring for what you're doing? Nobody cares. And she walked off. Again, like, just in my face. And I was thinking, oh, Krishna, what did I do, But then I understood, Krishna wants to see how can we react in these situations. And actually, if we really take it in the right consciousness, is like the gopis. They have to brave so many things. All the neighbors, they're insulting them. Unchaste ladies running away in the night, what are you doing? Always like mischievous. They always have the beady little eye on them. And so similarly, in all our devotional service, but on the street is like often is more in your face. We have to endure these difficulties where we can then really meditate on, okay, Krishna, whatever you give me, that's what I will take. And I understand this is the mood of the gopis, and that's what I'm aspiring for anyway. So thank you for sending me this, these teachings, these situations where we can really become humble, more tolerant than a tree, and still be positive, and have all faith that this will actually help us in growing spiritually. And then it's so uplifting, and then whatever people say, you don't care. It's even inspiring. Wow, this is Krishna speaking to me through this person. Thank you so much. And you go on in your book distribution, in your service. So in this way, there is no difference between the gopis braving the difficulties and the devotees on the street. The gopis dance and chant by the banks of Yamuna. We dance and chant in the temple room. No difference. And the gopis serve Radha and Krishna by fanning and singing, and we by distributing books and talking about Krishna. When the gopis bring a new gopi to serve the divine couple to increase the sphere of loving exchanges, then Krishna asks, who is that new gopi? Shri Radha then answers, she is such and such, who has been brought here by our dear servant. Then, as a reward, Radha and Krishna cast a loving glance at that gopi who recruited the new servant. And that is our preaching. When we distribute a book, people read them and enter into Krishna's family. That is real Kunja Seva. Then Gauranga, Radha Krishna, glance very pleasingly at the preacher, and the collective effect of those glances will be to manifest his or her spiritual form. That is the connection between book distribution and service to Radha Shyam. With each book, Radha Shyam cast a glance your way. By one such glance, millions of universes are created. What then can be said of the wealth of a preacher? Right? It's powerful. Imagine Krishna just with one glance, he can create everything. So what can be said of the wealth of a preacher who gets so many glances of Radha Krishna, so much appreciation? Wow, this soul, he's extending himself to help others to come to me. He's just so indebted. That's why eventually we'll say, Na parayaham, I cannot repay you. So yeah, that's a quick way of getting purified, of going through all these things that will take away our selfish concerns, our being lamenting about our material situation, and then opening up our vision away from the déformation professionnelle, of being a conditioned soul, that I and mine, to how can I serve Krishna. And then naturally, by practicing devotional service, we will come to the stage of bhava and go back to Krishna after this lifetime. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Grantaraj Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanand.